Have you thought this through?
No way will that work.
Are you sure? Is there any money in that?
You'll never make any money doing that. How are you going to pay the mortgage? Just get a job.
You're going to try and sell that? Why can't you be normal like everybody else? Oh, boy. Were your parents morons too?
The savvy entrepreneur to the rescue.
Congratulations. That really turned out well.
That was a really good job.
I'm going to admit it. I'm surprised.
You know, I wish I thought of that.
I never thought anyone would. How did you do that?
I'm so glad you're pursuing your dreams.
I wish I had the courage to follow my dreams.
Hey there. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur. We are broadcasting live from WLCB 101.5 FM from Chicago, Milwaukee, greater area. I'm your host, Doris Nagel, and I'm a crazy entrepreneur myself, and I love helping other entrepreneurs. I've counseled lots of small businesses and startups as part of my law and consulting practice over the past 30 years, and I've also helped or started myself at least 9 different businesses. And boy, I have made a lot of mistakes along the way, and my passion now is to share what I've learned. I know there's lots of resources out there, and I know there are mistakes that I've made that I hope other people don't make. So my goal is to inspire and also to educate, and along the way, hopefully have a lot of fun. As always, I welcome your comments, your questions, your suggestions. If there's a topic you'd like to hear about, you're having a challenge, I'll do my best to either answer it or find you an answer. If you've got a resource that you'd like to share, or you'd like to be a guest, or maybe know somebody who'd be a great guest, just email me at dnagel, Nagel, at Lakes Radio, Lakes plural, lakesradio.org. The show will be better for your input. And now I'd like to introduce our guest for today. Joining me by phone today is Chelsea Brownridge, who will share the story of a little company that's small but rapidly growing called DogSpot, with a unique solution to help people with pets. So I kind of think of it as Spot Hero for dogs, but I'm not sure if that's accurate, and we'll find out as we chat with Chelsea. So hang on a second here, and we'll get her on the phone. So just by way of introduction, Chelsea Brownridge is DogSpot's Chief Executive Officer and Chairman. She was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she attended UNC at Chapel Hill. Hey, Chelsea, good morning. It's Doris Nagel.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. I guess it's afternoon for you. Chelsea's based in New York. Thanks for joining us this morning. I was just doing a quick introduction, saying you were born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, a very lovely place, I might say. I'm pretty partial to North Carolina. She attended UNC, University of North Carolina, at Chapel Hill. She earned a bachelor's degree there and also co-founded the Carolina Microfinance Initiative. So if we have a chance this morning, Chelsea, we can talk for a minute about that, because that in and of itself sounds pretty interesting. But then she moved to New York and got her master's of public administration from NYU. And, well, she also worked in several operational capacities at a place called Ashoka and also SY Partners. And then she partnered with the Huffington Post, which most people have heard of, and founded something called Ignite Good, which is a nonprofit focused on grassroots movement building. And while she was working there, she rescued her terrier mix and, I guess, soulmate, right, Winston? And with Winston as their inspiration, she and her partner, Todd Schechter, dreamed up DogSpot in 2015 and got financial support through several pitch competitions, which I would love to hear about, Chelsea, because I'm not sure how many startup businesses know about pitch competitions or how to find the right ones and how to actually be successful doing them. So I'm sure you'll have some words of wisdom on that. But she currently lives in Brooklyn, where she's an advocate for rescuing dogs. Surprise, surprise, given her company is called DogSpot. And she's a fan of country music and a dedicated triathlete. So with that introduction, Chelsea, thank you so much for being on the show today. Welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah. So I have to admit, I'm a self-professed dog lover. In fact, at one point, I was accused of being a dog hoarder. And I wasn't actually offended when somebody said that. And in honor of our interview today, I actually brought my dog to the radio station studio today. So he's sitting at my feet because I figured he'd want to hear what you had to say.
Oh, what's his name?
His name is Phineas.
Love that. What kind of dog is
he? Is a Yorkie Bichon mix. He's about 10 pounds, so he fits under the airplane seat, which is great. He's named by my daughter after her favorite cartoon show, Phineas and Ferb. So we don't have Ferb. I don't know where Ferb is yet, but Ferb could appear one of these days. I don't know. But anyway, he's in the studio today, so he's waiting anxiously to hear about something that's cool for dogs.
Yeah, I also have it's Saturday here, so obviously, so I have my two dogs are also at home, and they're in the other room. So I've got Winston, of course, he's actually today's his birthday. He's 7 years old today.
Oh, happy birthday, Winston.
Thanks. Yeah, and then I rescued a second dog about a year and a half ago, and her name is Pepita. And so they're both in the other room. So if you hear some barking, they sometimes play. But I guess
my dog might bark back. I don't know. He probably will wonder where the sound is coming from. That's great. So are they best pals, or are they still trying?
They are. Yeah. We got really lucky. We sort of introduced them. We read all the different best practices of introducing a second dog to your family. And so when we brought her home, we actually had Winston out for a walk. We brought her out to a neutral territory. They always say don't bring the second dog into the home or someplace where they might feel threatened. And so we had them play, and then we walked them together, and they were, it was almost immediate best friends, and they play very similarly. Yeah, it's really fun.
Well, dogs are pack animals, and they love their human pack, but there is something fun and special watching other dogs bond with other dogs, isn't there?
Yep.
So we could probably talk all morning, at least for the whole hour, about dogs and dog training and funny things our dogs do because that's what dog crazy people do. But I know our listeners would really like to hear a little bit about your company. So what is DogSpot exactly, and how did it come about?
Sure, yeah. So DogSpot, we put high-tech dog houses in front of places that don't allow dogs inside. So commonly grocery stores, coffee shops, cafes, anywhere because of federal health code rules where dogs, and of course, unless they're service dogs, wouldn't be allowed inside. And so living in a city like New York, it would frequently be a place where you would see maybe a dog tied up outside if you live in a more drivable area, places where you might see a dog in the parking lot in the car.
Which, of course, is not a good thing generally when it's really cold or even if it's kind of warm. So
That's right. Yeah, no, it's super dangerous. And so, and tying your dog up is too. So dog theft is on the rise in cities because as we value our dogs more, that just means they're more valuable. And so thieves know that. And so for me, where it came from is living in Brooklyn, having, I've had dogs my whole life, but Winston was my first, dog as a young adult, and had him on my own, and I realized just how many places I would go on a daily basis where they had that big "No Pets Allowed" sign on the door. And so what it would mean is if I was already out with Winston, I couldn't go into the store because I would never tie him up outside. Or if I was knew that I was leaving the house and I may be out for hours, running around the city doing things. And it was one day in particular where he could have been with me for hours enjoying the sights and sounds and smells of the city. And he loves, there's nothing more, he loves them when he sees me putting my shoes on and he just wants to come, and so it would break my heart
I was just going to say my dog, other than the WALK word, road trip are the other two favorite words that my dog uses.
And that's the thing is, they love being out of the house, and and especially if you live in a city in smaller apartments, oftentimes without outdoor space, the city is their backyard. And so it would kill me when I would be out running errands, and a lot of them he could have come to, if I was just picking, there are a lot of places that are dog friendly, but if there was even one stop all day long, where it would have been a no dogs allowed situation, it just meant he couldn't come. And I thought, man, if there was only a way where for a few minutes, if I have to run to a store, there's this one stop in my day, he gets to enjoy the 98% of the other parts. And that would be way better for him and more enjoyable for just the both of us to spend time together. And then I realized we weren't alone. So American Pet Product Association, I started digging into some data, and I started talking to all my dog friends and people at the dog park, and I found out that 87% of people bring their dogs on errands every single week, at least once a week.
Wow.
A third are doing it every single day. And so when I started learning more about the market, I thought, man, I'm not alone, right? This is a personal frustration that I would like to solve, and I'm certainly not the only dog owner with it.
There's no question that dogs have become a more integral part of our life, I think, as people feel more isolated and maybe disconnected. People move more often or are not close to their families. I mean, I think there's some remarkable studies where people say their dog is, when they ask who their best friend is, they say their dog.
Well, that's right. And there's a lot going on there. So one, there's a program called Mars, Better Cities for Pets, and they did some research recently, and they actually found that dogs are responsible for more social connection than church and children. I mean, they just play such an important role in that. And you're right, the other trend.
I certainly met most of my neighbors through walking the dogs and meeting people as they walk
Well,
there,
the world is becoming more dog friendly, and that's what's great. So about a third of all workplaces are now have pet friendly policies, which means our dogs are going to work with us.
Well,
and they're out
Chicago.
of their.
I got to tell you, there's the Midwest. That may be a coast thing, East Coast, West Coast, but it hasn't hit the Midwest yet. I got to tell you,
it's coming. I mean, it's because so many places are becoming more hotels than ever are dog friendly. More restaurants are allowing them on patios, and so they just are living lives outside of the house in ways that we really didn't see 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Right. And so that's why I think the time is now for a solution like DogSpot, because they are out and about with us. People are being educated that tying them up and leaving them in the car just isn't a safe option. And in fact, a lot of states in cities are making it illegal to do either one of those things.
Oh, really?
And so, but that's the thing is you can put up a law like that, but unless there's a solution, you need, it's difficult to tell people, well, you can't do this thing you're doing. And yes, in a grand world, we would all have enough time to walk our dogs for hours a day and be able to do all of our errands and everything else in the meantime, but that's oftentimes what we'll hear is we'll just leave them at home. And absolutely, in a lot of cases, it's still going to make the most sense to leave them in the comforts of their home. But if you're out and about, why not provide a better alternative to what we see happening today?
Absolutely. All right. So you had a great idea, which was to help solve this problem, but there's probably a lot of different ways to tackle it. So how did you go about deciding on the model? I guess first describe what the model really is, and then how you decided on that model as opposed to, I don't know. There's probably other wacky, a lot more wacky solutions like hiring somebody to stand outside the door.
Yep. And that's the thing. When I experienced and I've been experiencing the problem at sort of a low level inconvenience often, but it was this one day in particular that it struck me. It was this one day he could have been out with me all day. I was making this one, 15, 20 minute stop along the way that he wouldn't have been able to go inside the store. And so he just had to stay home. And it was that day that I thought, man, I thought to myself, I would pay someone to make sure Winston is safe for this 15, 20 minutes so that he could have been out with me the rest of the day. And that's when I started thinking about the solutions. And I thought about a ton of different things. I thought about, well, what if there was this mobile, doggy like daycare where you could call them up and they would like drive up to you and it'd be in this like, truck or something and like there'd be a safe place for your dog, or what if there was someone I could call and they would come, quickly, right? Like, 'cause that's the thing. It's all about that. It still needs to be convenient, right? Like, I'm not going to wait around for half an hour for someone to show up. But if someone could come within 5 minutes, like, would I schedule that and wait for that? Probably. Right. And then I thought about, well, what if there were more tiny, like, brick and mortar doggy daycares where you could drop them off by the 10-15 minute block of time? And anyways, I thought about you're right. I thought about a whole bunch of different ways to solve for the problem. But the reality is as I dug into each one of those, the business model wouldn't have made sense, right? Because when you think about what would I be willing to pay, right, to have somebody make sure Winston's safe in those, 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes where I'm going into a place where he can't go, versus what would I need to charge to make that model work. And it never lined up. It wasn't like I wasn't going to be willing to spend, $30 for like 15 minutes, and and that's sort of what
to call Uber and have Uber drive the dog around the block.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it was like, that's too premium. That's too expensive. And the whole point is I'm out running around. I'm looking for convenience, right? I'm not going to wait 10, 15 minutes for like the solution to show up. I need it when I need it. I need it on the go. And so that's when I came up with DogSpot, which is it's a high-tech doghouse. It sits directly in front of the place where you need it. And then, of course, as I started thinking about, well, what does a home away from home look like for a dog? And what would what are all the what-if scenarios it would need to serve, right, to make sure the dog is always safe and comfortable? And as a dog mom, I was starting, all the questions I'm sure we'll get to today ran through my head. Well, okay, it needs to be clean, and it needs to be the right temperature, and I want to be able to watch him the whole time, and I want to know that I can trust the service, and that, like, it has, what if technology fails, right? What if, all the what ifs is where I then started going with the technology.
How do you lock it and keep it locked, but then open it when you need it opened?
Yep. That's right. And so that's when the technology startup of DogSpot was born, because the unit economics, what are called, the business model, which is, so DogSpot's 30 cents a minute. It's the right price. So if I'm going for 15 minutes, I'm paying like $4.50, right? And that's a good price for it. Like, and
I'd pay that. Yeah.
Right. So it was the right price, and that's because naturally it's a self-service doghouse, and so there is no human there, and that's how we are able to keep the price at a point where it's really approachable for pretty much anyone. And so the conflict over, well, how do I keep my dog safe, and am I willing to pay that? It's such a low price, and the reason we are able to do that is because it's a self-service doghouse. So there's not as soon as you introduce a person who's standing there with the dog, or something like that, that's when the price I couldn't get it to work with a human intervention, I guess. So it had to be technology.
Well, right, but there's a fair bit of, it sounds simple, okay? So you get this little doghouse out in front of your favorite grocery store, and you put the dog in. And in and of itself, that sounds really straightforward, but having been involved with a bunch of startups before, I start thinking, well, wait a minute though. Okay, now you've introduced the technology of the doghouse, but you've also introduced the technology of having it available on demand and being able to lock it and then unlock it when you need it to be locked. So how did you solve some of those tech problems?
Yeah, so I had the idea about 5 years ago, and at that time, I'm sure a lot of listeners and you might be familiar with, this was when, Uber, of course, had already been around for about 5 years or something, at least. I think maybe not quite that long, maybe about 4 years. Uber had been around, at least in New York, for like 3 or 4 years at that point. So people were familiar with needing to download apps to get services. And also at that time, we were starting to see bike sharing, car sharing, and then, of course, more recently, scooter sharing has been popping up everywhere. So the technology of needing to have an app in order to access some sort of service, and being able to access an app to use a piece of hardware, right, like a bike or a car or a scooter, this was already starting to bubble up. And at that time, there was this really big trend of IoT, which is an acronym for Internet of Things. Yeah. That's right. So this is where we're able to make any device smart. and that's because it's connected to the internet. So anyways, there are a whole bunch of trends going on, and it's interesting. When I first had the idea for DogSpot, which at the time was called Dog Parker, now it's DogSpot, I jumped. One of the first things I did, of course, was like I jumped on the computer to see, well, has anyone else done this, right? Like, what's sort of one of the first things you do is like, right, does this exist? And I just haven't seen it. And I remember being shocked when I didn't find anyone doing this. And I thought, I wonder why. It just like, to me, it was just like, this is such an obvious thing. I can't believe nobody's ever done this before. Like, how likely, usually when you have an idea, you kind of look and someone's already trying to do it somewhere. Right. And I think it's because the technology, it was the right idea at the right time in terms of the tech. Right. So the tech was just recently available because everyone has a smartphone in their pocket now. Everyone's getting familiar with downloading apps. Right. You can make devices smart like a doghouse. So the internet connection is critical to us being able to deliver a reliable service that's monitored, that has all the redundancies in place. If you just put a doghouse out there without the ability to monitor the temperature remotely, unlock the house yourself from your phone, monitor your dog through the puppy cam and a live stream,
and be able to book it so that you know it's actually available when you want it to be available. You know?
That's right. Yeah, all of those things wouldn't have been possible really 10 years ago. And honestly, even 5 years ago, as we started developing the tech, we were really pushing the boundaries of what the technology could do. And then so funny, people are like, oh, cute, it's a doghouse. But actually, it's a really complicated piece of technology, and necessarily so for us to be able to deliver on the value. Now, I think while we were right on the money in terms of the technology and being able to produce the unit, I think we were, and we still continue to be, a little bit ahead of our time, I think, in terms of the actual offering. So the idea of putting your dog into a doghouse that's outside the grocery store, I think, is still something that we're finding. We're seeing the popularity grow month over month, quarter over quarter, but it's still a brand new concept. Nobody's ever seen this before, and it takes humans a while to get comfortable with doing anything new in their routine. And so that's true. So that's where I think that's the learning curve that we're currently riding is getting the humans. And the funny thing is the dogs are perfectly comfortable. The dogs they're den animals. They feel very safe in enclosed den-like environments. We've worked with animal behaviorists and veterinarians to design a space that they would love. And so most people are like, oh, I don't know, will my dog like it? And the answer is, well, yeah, with enough training and acclimation and positive reinforcement, dogs can be trained to be comfortable in many environments, just similar to if you ever tried to get your dog into a bag before, the little airline carrier or crate training in general at home. Right. It's a very similar process.
Yeah. It strikes me too that the other piece of your model that I spent some time on your website, which is a great website, by the way. It's very informative and it's fun. But I wondered about how you chose your distribution model and marketing model. So, one strategy obviously is going door to door and saying, you got the local bookstore and you say, hey, would you put one of these outside your place or the grocery store? But at some point that becomes challenging to really scale. So how do you decide where to put the units, and not only what kind of stores and even the stores within your neighborhood, but then geographically how to expand?
Yeah, so we've done this in two phases. So we're based in Brooklyn. So the first thing we did is we just started here at home. So we put 50 houses up all around Brooklyn, and we would just pound what I always say is we would just pound the pavement. So we would go out, we'd go door to door, we'd show some pictures of what the doghouse looked like. We would ask them, hey, do you ever see dogs tied up outside? Are people trying to bring their dogs inside and you have to tell them to leave? We were just trying to pinpoint where the problem was. And of course, the problem was also visual. Like, you could see it, because if you were walking by a store and there's a dog tied up, that's a great place for a dog spot. Right. And so we did it two ways. One, we wanted to stay here at home. With a new technology, we wanted to keep it close to home early days as we were continuing to do R&D and manufacture and really build the product, the technology itself. So we started here. And eventually we built up over about a year time to 50 units all around sort of Brooklyn, mostly in front of places that you would expect, like ice cream shops and coffee shops and grocery stores. We also tried a few oddballs, mostly because the stores then started reaching out to us and asking if they could have one. So, we had like a little gift shop ask for one, but the gift shop was dog friendly. So we were like, I don't know that makes sense, but okay. We've had a couple bars like ask us for them. Again, I wasn't really.
I think car mechanics and car dealerships when you take your car in.
We had all kinds of ideas, and so we were like, okay, well, let's just learn. And we're so early days, let's just throw it out there and let's see if it works, right? And what we learned was some places worked great, like coffee shops and grocery stores, and some places didn't, like bars and gift shops, and sort of more kind of the utilization just wasn't there. And that's okay. We knew we would learn which ones were most in demand. And we have a place on our website where people can request dog spots. Both the businesses themselves can email us and say, I want one. And then also dog owners or pet parents can go on there and make suggestions. And so if we saw that 10 people suggested the same bodega or corner market or something, then okay, we would call that corner market and we'd say, hey, we've had a lot of requests for dog spot at your location. Are you interested in hosting one? And, it was great because then we already knew that we had a built-in user base. They were already asking for it to be there.
Right.
So then we learned a lot about, that was Brooklyn. We learned a ton about a city network and the network effect of just no matter where you go. I mean, Brooklyn back in those days, it's almost no matter which neighborhood you were in, there was a dog spot a block or two away. And that really changes the way you can move about the city with your dog, if you can imagine. And we ran into regular.
Change people's perceptions too, I think. When you start to see them everywhere, then all of a sudden it's not this weird thing. It's, wow. There's another one and another one. Everybody's doing it,
Yeah, right. That's right. And there was that social proof was necessary. So people wanted, when you saw one and you thought, oh, what is this? And you kind of read it, you look at it. And then when you see a dog just sitting or laying down in one calmly, especially on a hot summer day and they're in there in like 65 degree cooled temperature, it's like, okay, I get it. This is nice. And then but in Brooklyn, we were mostly because the city's so dense, buildings go right up to the property line. Most of our houses were on what's called the public right of way or the sidewalk. So right in front of the store. There was always enough clearance. We were, the sidewalks were nice and wide and we would oftentimes sort of nestle it in beside a planter or a rack of carts. It would sort of be amongst the other things that are out in front of these stores. But because we were the first to ever put a doghouse on a sidewalk, there are some things that are in the code that you can have things on the sidewalk, but doghouse, naturally, never having existed before, was not on the list of approved things to be on a sidewalk.
I never thought about that, but absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we worked here in Brooklyn for 2 years between our garage prototype and our manufactured model, but eventually the city said, look, this needs to be in the code. So we had to remove all 50 houses, and about 4 months ago, it was a pain. About 4 months ago, though, we passed a law with the city council. We were in support of this new introduction. It was to allow for what are called safe animal harbors in front of commercial establishments. And DogSpot being
you're a whole new category, a safe animal harbor.
We're a whole new That's right. So they are now permitted to be on the sidewalks of Brooklyn specifically. We started just in this borough. We still need to, we haven't relaunched Brooklyn yet. We still have a few houses out here on private property in the meantime, but we will relaunch those Brooklyn houses later this year. Timeline a little TBD, but we certainly hope by summer.
That's interesting. Although I would guess in suburban locations in many places, you probably would have
there's lots of private property.
I mean, I'm just thinking of the grocery store I went to last night. I mean, there's a ginormous parking lot, and there's obviously plenty of room where the shopping carts are, where you can line up half a dozen DogSpot units, and they'd be on private property, and I don't know if there'd be any code issue at all,
It varies, and that's one of the things we've had to navigate as a new thing that nobody's ever seen before, and people don't quite know. They're like, well, you're not a bench, you're not a planter, you're not a red box, or what are you?
You're not a shopping cart. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
You're not a shed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
So we've had to navigate it, but we've done that fairly well, and we've not of course without the learnings and hiccups along the way. But when we had to remove all 50 units from Brooklyn, that's when we went national. That's when we said, okay, great. Well, we know our product is solid. We know people like it. We know the stores want it. So let's open it up. And that's why you'll see the map now. If you go to our website, helloDogSpot.com, and then /locations, you'll sort of see that we're coast to coast now. Our biggest network is actually in Seattle, of all places, which couldn't be further away from where we are now. But
there's a lot of coffee shops there, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so maybe that's not a coincidence. I don't know.
Yeah, so we started growing anywhere at that point. So we said, okay, well, we have a product. We know how to operate it. Certainly operating our houses remotely was always part of the plan. It wasn't exactly the right, I wouldn't say if all things being equal, we would have chosen to do it at that time. But look, we couldn't operate here in New York, so we had to go elsewhere. And so we did. And in July of 2018, about a year and a half ago, is when we started putting out houses basically out anywhere. So we have a location in Austin, Texas, and we've got a bunch in Seattle and Portland and Boise, Idaho, and we've just been following what I call following the thread. Who wants the houses? We opened it up nationwide. We got a lot of inbound interest, and we mostly have stayed focused on grocery. So most of our locations are now really focused on the grocery store. It's the number one location request that we get. And we're working with really big chains now. We're working with Kroger, Albertsons, Meijer, and so that's been nice. So to your point earlier of, pounding the pavement, going door to door, it takes a long time, but for us to work with.
You need a partner that has reach that you can tap into, so you're making connections at a corporate level and they're helping deploy it, I think, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yep, that's right. So that's where we are now. But, we couldn't have done that day one, to knock on Albertsons or Kroger's door and say, hey, we're DogSpot. Can we put some dog, for us to have 2 years of successful, or I guess even longer at that time, about almost 3 years of success with the product, with the operations, with happy customers. It was necessary, because then Kroger and the big guys they'll start to take you more seriously.
Interesting journeys. So let's rewind, though, just a little bit. I think you talked about the operational piece and how you went from concept to an actual functioning product and the technology behind it. But how did you go about getting funding for it? I mean, that's a fixation, and I think rightly so, for a lot of startup businesses, particularly ones that need to invest in technology or manufacturing capacity, and you needed both. So how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so early days, like most entrepreneurs, I had to, and a first-time entrepreneur for sure. Maybe if you're an exited entrepreneur, you can just go out there and raise money on an idea. For us, though, we needed to show that we could build it, that the technology could exist, right? Because we were really pushing the boundaries of IoT and what the tech could be. And we needed to prove demand. There was no one else that we could point to. There wasn't another doghouse operator that we could say, look, there's a market for this. There's demand for this. Like, we're just going to do that, but we're going to do it better. Give us money. We had to build the tech. We had to put it out in the world and see if anyone would put their dog inside of one of our doghouses.
Basically prove that there's a market for it, right? And what the price point is.
Yeah, so we couldn't raise money. Again, I'm not, some people might have more access to friends and family who could sort of believe in you and fund an idea. But, so what I did is I worked full time. I still had a job, and that's how I was able to pay myself, and any extra money I had went into paying a friend of a friend who was an electrical engineer to help us build the first prototype in a garage in Brooklyn. And just, did what they basically call bootstrapping. So we bootstrapped the first models, the first prototypes, and we put them out there, and we didn't raise any money early on, and took on, credit card debt, and, you do what you have to do. And so I did all of that. I really believed in the product. Now, to be clear though, I didn't invest any money into building the prototype until I had done sufficient market research. So that's always the first thing, is what can you do that doesn't cost anything, right? So what I did is I went out and I talked to as many dog owners as I could, which luckily dog owners, again, love talking about their dogs. So it wasn't so hard to find a whole bunch of dog owners who would tell me about their dog and their life with their dog and their routines. And so I did that first. I validated that this was a big enough problem just through internet research and market research and talking to people. And then I went to go talk to businesses, and I tried to figure out if it was a big enough problem for them too. So would the dog owner use it, and would the store let me put it in front of their store? So I just went and had a whole bunch of conversations, and I just did that on weekends or, off hours of my job. I feel like I said I had kept my job. And then once I felt satisfied with the answer that there would be a big enough market, and I built some financial models and tried to better understand how, what do I think I could build a doghouse for, and what do I think it would cost to operate it, and how much usage do I think it would get, and you just sort of do the basics of the financial models. Then I started investing some money into making it come to life, and then like I said, that was all bootstrapped. But the first institutional or non-Chelsea money that I put into it, there's a few things. So I applied to some pitch competitions. So there's in New York, and I think in a lot of markets, there are, early stage, bring your idea, you submit some information about what you're trying to build. And
so
and
how
you
do
get
you
selected.
find out about those? I mean, and how do you, I don't know if there's tons and tons of them, but how do you know you found the right one?
Yeah, well, they'll tell you what they're looking for. So for us, we're hardware, right? We have a physical product, and so we're a hardware startup. And so there was a group here called Future. The program was called FutureWorks, and it's from the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And we were really lucky that NYC EDC was starting to invest money in hardware technology startups because the city as a whole had a goal of attracting more startups to New York. They want startups here, startups that create job creation and all sorts of things that are positive for the economy. And so they were trying to attract startups to be here, and that means creating a healthy ecosystem for startups. So startups want to be here, right?
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways, it doesn't make any sense to start a company in New York or San Francisco because of the cost of living, right? And so if you're like, it makes a lot of sense to start
Chicago
companies where
either, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great if you can, but like the talent and the ecosystem is here, and that's the trade-off. So it is a great place to build companies, even though the cost of living is really high, because you have infrastructure here and talent to be able to pull on. So I remember Googling like hardware. I think I started Googling like hardware startups, and I found all these meetup groups. So once a month, there was this hardware. It's literally just called the Hardware Meetup, and it's a whole bunch of people that are trying to start hardware companies. And then you go and you talk to them, and then they tell you about things that they're applying for, or the competitions. Of course, the competitions want to find you, and so they're promoting it on newsletters. So I joined a whole bunch of technology startup newsletters in New York. I went to a whole bunch of meetups, and I just found them by Google searching or recommendations from other people. And you just kind of start to network and find your way in, and that's how the opportunities would present themselves.
So I think there's a few lessons here, some really valuable insights for entrepreneurs, especially those who are just starting out. I mean, one is obviously, as you said, methodical, thorough market research before you spend a lot of money. I have definitely worked with and been actually, guilty as charged, part of a couple of startups where the original idea just, it just was so exciting, and so, you're with a group of friends, and where everybody's like, oh yeah, it's great, that's great, of course it's great. But no, we don't really need to do a lot of market research. Everybody will know this is great. And it starts to become kind of an echo chamber where you hear only what you want to hear. And so getting that market research so important. Another kernel out of this is look for pitch competitions and hone your ideas and your presentation skills in those competitions. And I think a third is network like crazy. Just be really methodical about it. Try all the different ways and be very persistent. I think Meetup it's a phenomenal resource, and I'm always amazed at how many people don't necessarily know about all the different ways it can be used. So I think those are all phenomenal insights.
Yeah, well, and that money early on was a lifeline. So we got $10,000 from being a part of, this was non-dilutive, meaning we didn't have to give up any equity for it. But the grants that we got from the Future Works New York City Economic Development Corporation was $10,000. We applied to the Brooklyn Public Library, had a business plan competition, and I think we got $5,000 from that, and that's how I was able to pay the engineer and not take on, as much debt otherwise. And so, I mean, early on, like, that money was so helpful, because otherwise it just would have taken, who knows? I guess I would have figured out another way, but, credit cards were certainly involved in the process. But the less, the better.
Yeah. It can be financially painful, that's for sure.
Yes.
Working with a startup and being part of a startup, that's for sure. I'm sure it's been just an amazing journey. What's been the best part about it for you?
I think I'll never get over the feeling I had early on when even just the garage prototypes. And these were, we bought, when I mean garage prototype, we bought an off-the-shelf doghouse. We had our own we built it on what's called a Raspberry Pi, the technology, and it was, very homemade, because manufacturing something is extremely expensive, and we couldn't do that until we raised proper, early stage venture capital and from angel investors. So early on, we had to prove the concept with, this $500 doghouse that we bought off the shelf that then we made a custom door for and got a lock and webcam. And anyways, we were able to buy everything sort of offline, or rather off the shelf. But when I remember putting that house out there, and that's when I left my job, was October of 2015, I guess. Yeah, October 2015, when the first 2 dog houses went out for testing, into the public. That's when I was full-time. I wasn't able to pay myself. I'd saved up a little bit of money, and but that's when I left my job and was full-time available, because if anyone needed customer service or they needed us or anything else, I wanted to be fully available, and they were in my neighborhood, so I was always going to be right there. But I remember I would just be walking down the street because they were in my neighborhood, and I would see it, and I would just see people gathered around it, looking at it. I would see someone, signing up, or, I did everything so manually back then. But just seeing people interact with it in the real world there's just nothing, it's just hard to describe this, there's this thing that's in your head, right? And you kind of imagine what it's going to look like.
It's your baby. You've given birth to your baby, right? And everybody likes your baby and says it's really good looking, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to sugarcoat it too much. I mean, people, we got it all. People thought, this is genius. This is amazing. I can't believe this hasn't existed. And we also got people who thought it was the crazy, and they still do. And that's fine. Any idea you put out into the world, you'll likely, hopefully you'll likely have both. Because I think it's the idea is if you put them out there and nobody even reacts to them at all, positively or negatively, then that means people aren't engaging with it. So with the really positive stuff also comes the negative and the opinions, and the internet is not always the friendliest place. But I really had to learn. I mean, you had to get some thick skin real fast.
Well, it sounds like that's been one of the harder parts of this whole journey is probably dealing with rejection and negative feedback. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, and that's going to be for anything you do. Yeah, part of the fundraising process is lots of no's. Part of the sales process is a lot of no's. And if you have a consumer-facing product where just normal people at the end of the day using it, you've got to keep your customers happy on all fronts. So yeah, you really have to have patience, and be able to pick yourself back up every single time it's a no or something gets knocked down, and that really is and you have to be, I think, in order to be able to keep picking yourself back up time and time and time again, you have to love your idea. You have to love the business and be deeply passionate about it, because if you're not, then who will be? It has to be you, and you have to see that through.
Well, at some point you moved well beyond local business pitch competitions. So how did you make that move to get beyond that to basically venture capital funding?
Yeah, one step at a time, really. So when I sort of getting that some early stage checks, sort of in the bootstrapping phase. That was helpful. We also got a lot of press, which was helpful, just I think because people love technology and dogs, and it was an interesting, quirky thing no one had ever seen before. So we were very lucky. We never sought it out. It just sort of kept finding us. And so as a result, that we had a lot of buzz around what was happening, and we were lucky that actually I think our very first check that we got, they reached out to us. They liked it, and they cut us a $200,000 check in June of 2016, I guess, a little less than a year after we put the house out. And again, I was not taking salary or anything else, so that $200,000 check was huge. I'll never forget looking at the bank account the day after that check came in and just thinking like, man, this is like, so, it was like I was like, I've never seen this much money in my life,
Yeah, wow.
And it was like, it was gonna support so much of the company and what we needed to do. And then we actually ended up raising another 200, because the nice thing is once you have someone who wants to put in money, you then sort of put together what's called a round. So you put terms together, and then you try to find other people. And when you've got that first big commitment, or what's considered a lead on the rounds, it does become at least a little bit easier to then find other people who want to follow on.
Humans, we know dogs are pack animals, but we humans are kind of pack animals too, right?
That's right.
You gotta find somebody to be the first, and then everybody says, "Oh yeah, I'll do that too," right?
Yeah, and the same thing too. You just network. So at that point, that early days, I was going to a lot of technology centered meetups to learn about tech and the tech community. And then I also started going to a lot of fundraising or investor nights. So I would meet investors, of course, through the pitch competitions, and a couple of times when we were pitching, people from the audience then ended up wanting to invest because they saw the pitch and they liked it, and they were angel investors. So you just sort of, again, the networking on the tech side just naturally, organically led to networking on the investor side. And I'd never raised any venture capital before, and you just sort of, you just network your way into it by putting yourself out there.
Where do you see the company going? Where do you want it to be in 5 years?
Yeah, we hope to have 10,000 units out in 5 years. So we're still very small today. We've got less than 100 units in the field. We hope to have 300 by the end of this year. So, it's interesting. I've talked
to a lot.
Well, I've talked to, it isn't, it isn't, in some ways it's like, man, we've been working on this for so long, but you have to have some patience with it, especially with physical device. There's a physical thing that has to get manufactured and has to get deployed in the field, and it just takes some time. And I've gotten to know quite a few other, we're kind of considered a kiosk company. So like if you think about Redbox or Coinstar or any of these other self-service kiosks, we're kind of like that in a lot of ways. And so I've gotten to know quite a few kiosk founders, because that's sort of one of the only, groups I can somewhat identify with in terms of trying to understand our business. And there's a big leap from 0 to 1. Of course, it's like a huge leap to actually make the thing. There's another really big leap from like single digits to double digits. And then there's an even bigger leap from sort of the dozens to the hundreds. And then once you get up to, this is what I've been told is the ones that have already made it to the hundreds, and we're not there yet. Once you're into the hundreds, all of a sudden it just starts to spiral up. And I'd be curious to go through that, having not gone through that before, but if our experience will match theirs in that way. So I guess we'll see in the coming years.
Well, and I'm sure it'll be interesting, and knowing how methodical you have been about everything, I'm sure that the concept of how to scale the business itself to support that kind of growth is, it's a problem every entrepreneur dreams about, right? But also one that is sometimes very challenging.
Yeah, well, for us, I think the way that we unlock the hundreds and eventually thousands scale is we're right on the tip of it now. So 7 months ago, we didn't have a single DogSpot placed other than with mom and pop shops. So, that's still new. So now that we're with Kroger, Albertsons, Meijer, that just happened 7 months ago. And so that's
huge.
Still fairly new.
Congratulations,
yeah, and so
by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I think now that we've had that pilot, get to know each other period with all these grocery store chains, every single one of them now is expanding. And so that's how we unlock the location scale, is by working with these large grocery store entities. And then what we've recently started doing too is working with dog brands like Purina, Mars Pet Care, some local brands like Portland Pet Food Company in Portland. And they have started unlocking for us more of a B2B model. So while we were founded on this idea of a pay by the minute doghouse where the consumers are paying to use it, more and more we're seeing these endemic brands like dog food brands step up and say, you've got these dog houses in front of grocery stores where we sell our products. We would love to sponsor these units, for their own benefit, of course, because they get. And so actually Purina has now sponsored units with Meijer, which are in Grand Rapids, and they've made them free for dog owners to use, which I love. And for me, that would be a dream come true. Yeah, I would love to make this free for all the, pet parents, so that just is a total no-brainer that you keep your dog, never leave your dog tied up or in a car. And that it becomes supported by these brands who also care about your dog and the safety of your dog, and also, of course, can get their own name out there for doing a good thing.
That is absolute genius. Well, the hour has just flown by, as it often does when we talk with great people like yourself and interesting companies like DogSpot. So what message would you like to leave with people about DogSpot and how they can reach you if they're interested in helping out, and what kind of help you'd like from people out there?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. So I guess, the best way to reach me is if anyone has any, I love helping other founders. If anyone has just what they want to talk, it's especially if you're a solo founder or you're even just getting started, starting a new company can be very, very lonely. So I think talking to people as much as possible. So if anyone has questions, they can reach me at Chelsea, CHELSEA, at dogparker, DOGPARKER.com. So I'm happy to chat with anyone about the company, either DogSpot itself or about anything that you're trying to do. I'm indebted to all the founders that I leaned on early days, and so very happy to, not that we're much farther along, but anything I can do to sort of help someone just getting started or at any point, I'm happy to do that. And then I think for us, like in terms of what people could do to help us, is they can go to our website, helloDogSpot.com. And then there is a place, I think it's towards the bottom of the homepage, where if you've got suggestions on where you want to see DogSpot in your own city, you can put suggestions there. Even better, if you happen to know, grocery store owners or people that work, and at those places where you want to see them, you can tell them about DogSpot. And there's a place on our website that says for businesses, and they can request a DogSpot there too.
Well, I know I will be watching for DogSpot in the Chicago area. I noticed, I looked on your map, you don't have any in Illinois or Chicago yet, and are just starting in Wisconsin, which is where the other part of our terrestrial listening area is. So I look forward to seeing DogSpots crop up all over in the Chicago, Milwaukee area.
We just signed our first couple locations. Actually, I don't know if you're familiar with it, in Downers Grove. I think it's a suburb of Chicago.
I do know. My brother used to live there. It is. It's a western suburb. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, we should talk offline if there's anything I can do to help you, because I'd be delighted to contribute to the cause, because, as I said, I'm a very passionate and longtime dog owner myself, and I hate leaving little Phineas at home, because he sure does love coming with me and enjoys every minute of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Chelsea, for being with us, and really appreciate you being on the show this morning. And I hope everybody enjoyed listening to the story of DogSpot as much as I did. You can listen to an on-demand recording, a podcast of today's show, along with other free information and resources for entrepreneurs. You can either go to the Savvy Entrepreneur show page at Lakes, Lakes, radio.org, or my consulting website, which is globalocityservices.com, or my law-related website, which is called forsythialaw.com. Now, be sure to join us next Saturday when our guest will be Fred Copestake, who runs his own training and consulting business. He'll share how he got started, his business model, as well as some of the challenges and rewards. And as a professional trainer, I can promise you he is not only entertaining to listen to, but fun because he's got this wonderful British accent. So it'll be a great listen, I promise. Be sure not to miss it. Chelsea, once again, thank you to you for being on the show. Chelsea Brownridge from DogSpot.
Thank you.
And until then, folks, I'm Doris Nagel, wishing you happy entrepreneuring.